And imagine if these expenditures could be reduced to one third of it. Rather than 10 million, you only spend 2.5 million, 3 million. Whenever the experimentation cost goes lower, what people do is they don't do same number of experiments. They do more experiments. Till 2020, the world produced 64 zettabytes of data. That's like a trillion gigabytes, right? And by 2025, this became like 183 or 184 zettabytes. Like wow. 3x in the span of 5 years.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Unleashing DePIN podcast. My name is Tyler. I'm your host, and I'm excited for our next guest that we get to have. We have Gaurav from IONET. How are you doing? Welcome to the podcast. Did I butcher it? Did I do okay? Did we get there?
Oh, you're 70% there. That's more than enough, to be honest.
We want to make sure we get that right. Well, how are you doing? Welcome to the Unleashing DePIN pod. It's good to see you.
I'm doing great, sir. The God has been great. And nice to meet you. And looking forward to our conversation.
I'm excited for this as well. I think maybe the best place to start is just to learn a little bit about yourself, hear about your background. I think people are probably familiar with IONET at this point in the space, but it'd be great to just understand maybe how we got here, share a little bit about yourself, and we'll go into it from there.
So I'm Gaurav. I'm currently CTO at IONET. A quick background about me would be that I started my career like 18, 19 years back from a couple of startups in India. I moved to Silicon Valley, worked in few startups there. Then moved to HP R&D, helped them build their network file system, version 4 for them. Then from there, wanted to actually go to a new side of things in engineering. E-commerce was becoming big, and Amazon was just starting up in India. So came back, joined Amazon a few years. From there, moved to eBay, was part of their platform team as an architect. Post that, there's a company known as Agoda, which is quite big in the Asian side of things, as a part of Booking Holdings Group. Was part of the leadership team in engineering. And from there, I moved to Binance, went to the Web3 side, wanted to explore something new because things were becoming repetitive. I was in e-commerce, OT for long. So ventured into my next challenge, which was Web3. So what other place to start from, like Binance, like best of the best in the Web3 side. So went there, learned a lot. Post that, I wanted to start something of my own or something which is very challenging, and which basically adds a value right from the beginning, a problem statement. And both in my journey of Binance, Agoda, and in fact, to be honest, Amazon and eBay also, I saw that the AI adoption was real and was growing over a period of time. And even when I was part of Agoda and Binance, we saw a couple of times that when we had money and when we had this requirement of GPUs, it was always very hard to get it, right? And I was lucky enough to work for big companies at that time, which has a lot of power in the industry. And still, if you're finding it challenging to get the resources, like what will be the case for these startups at this time? So I spoke to a few other ecosystem builders, and I realized that it is a real problem. And at this time, one of the founders of IONET reached out to me. I was already feeling this problem, understood their plan of DePIN, how they're going about it. Was the exact match, and just moved from Binance to here. That's a quick journey about me and how I landed up here.
Very exciting. It's always interesting to hear founder stories or team member stories, especially as they've transitioned from kind of the Web 2 big company doing startups, going into the Web 3 side. I'm curious, when you were at Binance, what were you actually working on there? Did it have any intersection with what you're doing today?
So I was predominantly towards the KYC, compliance, and fraud side of things for Binance. So when I came in at that time, they were trying to scale up their platform for more than 500 million users so that they're future-proof. And they wanted to create their own platform from scratch for this scale. And that's where I came in. We built our team from scratch at that time. We had a very small team of like less than 10 people. We scaled it up to like multiple X's the team size and built the platform there. One of the best problem statements to actually work on, to be honest. There were a lot of nuances when you do that product at scale for almost all nationalities, different kind of documents, different kind of flows, different kind of regulations, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that was the main area where I worked in there. And to be honest, the scale at which they used to get the request, it's hard to fathom, honestly.
Really? How many KYC requests were you guys getting a minute?
It's just public information. To be honest, it's not even KYC requests, right? Because a lot of times the normal trades when you put, a normal buy and sell which you put, right? Anything which you put, You have to do multiple checks of the compliance side of things, the regulatory side of things, data check for the users, who's doing it, is it the same? Like all these checks itself are like at such a high scale that the KYC may not be like your thousands and thousands of requests per second, but these checks like go in the order of millions of requests per second, to be honest.
Wow,
So
that's a
they're,
scaling
they're
challenge in
multi
computer science.
yes, yes. So
Yeah, that's gotta be fun.
and
Hence why you needed to
and
build out such a big team.
and to be honest, you're basically scaling it from million requests per second, but there's always a spike also in this business, right? For example, let's say a tweet from Trump, and suddenly the trade starts happening, right? There could be a huge spike of incoming traffic, which could be like 10x, 20x the normal traffic, right? Which itself is like millions of requests per second. So that adds up.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. I'm sure being on that team, there's probably a lot of stressful nights. You're not sleeping to keep up with everything. That's super interesting. So you transitioned from Binance over to IONET. I think maybe one of the best places to start here is just really understanding. You talked about experiencing these problems when you were at big companies, startups, hearing that other companies were experiencing similar problems, but can you maybe really unpack for people that are listening what the challenge is around the computational landscape? So if you're not a developer or if this is just something that you don't have a lot of experience with interfacing on, like how big the problem is really for folks?
I'll try to cover it in very brief, right? I think that'll tell you the crux of the thing, right? So let's assume you're an AI company and you're funded, let's say, $20 million, right? What do you need to succeed? You need like your founders with good vision. You need data science and engineers. And when they create these models for an AI company, the fundamental thing they need is the data and the compute. Now, more often than you'll see in many of these AI companies that 50% or more of their expenditures is basically going in the hardware.
Mm. And they're
Now,
actually
imagine
buying
if
physical hardware at those
they're
companies?
not buying physical hardware, they're renting it from the Amazon of
Right.
the world, right? Because their model also become complicated over a period of time. So they may need a specific model now, but when their model starts to become bigger, at that time they may need to change the model, right? So buying itself is may not be the smartest thing to do. But when you're going to the centralized players, they basically charge a premium for their brand, the way they own the inventory, how they manage everything. Right? We can go into the details later on for this, right? But they charge a premium for that inventory which they have, right? And the startups have to spend like more than 50% of the fundings on this, right? And imagine if this expenditures could be reduced to one third of it. Rather than 10 million, you only spend 2.5 million, 3 million. Imagine how many engineers and data scientists you can hire in your company. If you can run your company for a year, now you can extend by 2, 3 years. The amount of
Right.
experiments you can do, the amount of pivots in the product you could do, and the probability of you succeeding goes higher and higher. Right?
Right.
And if one company succeed, then there are other companies which learn from them. They adapt their product and learnings, and then it's a whole ecosystem. One person, when they win, it actually results in other people winning also. There's a whole ecosystem. It plays a huge role, these GPUs and this whole AI system, ecosystem overall. And the other thing is, even if you're able to get those GPUs, get that money, and you get the acceptance from the centralized player that we will give you GPUs, it takes weeks and months to physically get the access to these GPUs in the practical world. So they may take
Sure.
your money, they may say, oh, you have these GPUs, but in actuality, you able to deploy your models, it takes weeks and months many times.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's an opportunity cost in our part of the world, right? Like nowadays, like you make $1 billion companies within a year with 30, 40 people, right? So if you're
Right.
delayed by a couple of months, you can lose your position in the market. You may be beaten by a competitor who already have an access to GPU. There's so many threats as a company you have if there's a delay like this in the business. So I think that's what we are trying to resolve for these AI companies. Hire more engineers and data scientists, which is enabling you to do more experimentation, run the company for longer, and get the access immediately to these resources.
Oh, that's huge. And I think that anybody that's either been at a startup or is currently running a company understands how important having multiple cracks to the apple is and being able to cut a lot of your infra costs to be able to have more developers so that you can do so is huge. So I was curious, is the cost savings or sort of the differentiation between some of the centralized providers a third roughly in terms of what you pay at AWS versus what you can pay with IONET?
So I think that there are a lot of aspects where the deepens of the world are much, much better than centralized players, right? I think we talked about the cost. We talked about the speed at which we get the access to this hardware. Then the centralization piece is anyhow there, like how much you can be stopped if a particular government or a regulatory body wants to stop you, right? That piece is also there. Then there's another aspect of the performance of your models, right? For instance, let's say if you're creating a model, sometimes how soon a response you get from that model is very critical to the business. For instance, if you're like, let's say we were talking about KYC, if you're doing a KYC and you're trying to capture an image of your passport, and you're supposed to get a feedback when you're hovering your camera over your passport that the image is not clear, there's a lot of glare on the image, right? That response is very important because when you're hovering your mobile on that passport, let's say you move your mobile from here to here, and at that time the feedback comes in like your image is blurry, right? It doesn't help you.
Right.
So performance of the models and response time is very, very critical. Meaning that the place where you're running your business from, the proximity of these GPUs also play a critical role. And many of these centralized players only have their data centers in some specific part of the world. They don't have the access to GPUs at city level. For example, if you ask us, we'll have GPUs in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, multiple cities of India, right? Middle East. You name the country, you will have it. You name the city within the country also. There's a very high probability that you'll have that also. So performance of the models is very, very important. And many times the response which you get from the model, how soon you get, is equally important. And that's why this proximity also plays a critical role. So I can keep going on and on, but I think the main thing is the cost, the speed of getting the access, the centralization piece, like the transparency, the confidence which you get as a company, like what you're accessing, where is it coming from, what risk do you have with this inventory, the proximity to your stack, the software stack to this GPU, like all these things play a huge role.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is certainly one of those cases where all of the benefits that DePIN delivers are really evident within your product and solution. Sometimes you see some of the benefits, but in your case, it really is all of them. Speaking of the supply a little bit, for people that aren't potentially really familiar with kind of the GPU landscape, can you just share, obviously you've got compute resources globally in different countries and cities and whatnot, but can you share what the different types of supply resources are in the network for either developers who are curious or people that are really just trying to understand how all of this kind of fits together?
So I'll tell you both sides of the stories, right? Like why we have succeeded as a company, and then I'll specifically answer your question also, right? So to answer your question specifically, we have H100s, we have A100s, we have 4090s, we have RTX series, we have Max also. We have all these ones, right? But fundamentally, I'll tell you, like the inventory which we have is what we have today, right? But why we have done well as a company is that a lot of the other DePINs, what they do is they basically own their own inventory. So for instance, again, if you let's say are a DePIN, you got funded by $100 million, and let's say you buy a specific model, let's say H100, and you buy 80 million worth of H100 for your inventory, right? And you're serving it to people. Now assume suddenly there's a new particular version of GPU which is launched, let's say B200, and everybody wants to have that. And you've spent 80 million on H100 already, right? How much you have left with, right?
Right.
So that's where being a pure DePIN matters. And that's what we saw that, yes, you can own the inventory, but there is so much you can scale. If you get the demand and you don't have the GPUs to get the access to that particular GPU, you have to spend money, you have to rent place, you have to hire a team, you have to request to NVIDIA, wait, you're again going down the centralization side, right? And if you lock in your money in buying this inventory, a new model comes in, then what, right? You can't scale. You can only scale that much, right? That's where we came in. We built the tech which enables us to get the inventory from anywhere and everywhere at scale. And then we created our tokenomics in a way that everything is sustainable in the ecosystem. And that's where we are as a company that today, whatever models are in demand, we can serve that. If tomorrow these GPUs change. Let's say there's a new version comes in, or maybe a particular model technology, like say a DeepSeek came in, and that could be run on a lower grade hardware with a better performance, right? We can have more of those also. We can pivot anytime because we don't own the inventory.
Yeah.
We take it from people and we actually build the network in a way that whatever is in demand, we have that particular model more comparatively.
Yeah.
So that's what fundamentally enables us to win also.
No, that's a huge competitive advantage. One of the things that I'm curious about is because you are a protocol sort of aggregating these different supply resources. And we're in an interesting time where you have DeepSeeks of the world that come out and challenge the status quo to some extent in terms of what we thought was possible. But as we're seeing kind of these large scale data center rollouts, do you see continuing to build like the future, call it the future types of supply resources in the network becoming more challenging? Is there, whether it's related to supply chains or maybe anything just going on with tariffs and whatnot? Obviously you're positioned to be super agile, but do you foresee there being some challenges on that front in the future?
So this demand and supply gap is not going to get reduced, right? And I think people have already seen it in past. They are not able to correlate that yet. So let me give an example. Around 20 years back when I was in college, the desktop which I had, I forget the laptop, the desktop which I had, like my mobile is much more stronger than that.
Right.
People write more efficient code now, which needs less CPU power compared to what it used to be at that time. But yet, we saw the Amazons of the world or Microsoft Azure of the world becoming 100x in the CPU business over a period of time. Why? Because when a particular business model succeeds, right? Let's say like the internet industry succeeded, right? Then what people do is when the cost of a hardware goes low, right? More players come in. People sometimes think that okay, there's more supply and things are becoming cheaper, right? That will result in the whole ecosystem getting unbalanced. That's not the way things work in software industry. Whenever the experimentation cost goes lower, what people do is they don't do same number of experiments. They do more experiments. Because for them, it's basically like I have the same money pool, which I was using earlier to do X experiments. Now I'll do 5X. And what happens is when you do 5X experiments, now subset of them win, then you do experimentation more on those experiments. So it basically becomes exponential over a period of time. And you have seen it in the cases of the CPU demand. Amazon has become so big in past 15, 18 years when your computer is becoming more and more stronger. Your code is becoming more and more efficient. You still have a higher demand of CPU. And that's exactly the same case in GPUs. We are in a very early phase of adoption of AI. We are very early still, right? As and when the more and more innovation will happen, the model will become will more performant, better and stronger hardware will come. You'll see the same combination. Now, on top of that, GPUs are a bit more tricky also because the supply chain of GPU is more complicated than CPUs comparatively.
Right.
Then there's a trade, the whole geopolitical, the trade situation, the access to the actual hardware which is needed or metals which are needed for these GPUs. There's so many other factors also which make it even more complicated. So hence you will see the demand of GPU will go higher. The other limitation making sure that the output or the supply of the GPUs don't grow at a level which you have seen in CPUs. So the growth will be same or more like in CPUs, but the supply side will never be able to catch it because of the other reasons. So this delta will keep increasing over a period of time.
Yeah, I definitely concur with the assessment. I think the other thing that's interesting is that being a decentralized physical infrastructure network, you can potentially mitigate some of those geopolitical challenges, whether it's people that can purchase them in the same country and set them up and start running. And as we see it more and more manufacturing globally, that might be a competitive advantage for you. One of the one of the things that's really interesting is for all the benefits that the decentralization component brings to the table, it also introduces new challenges, one of which is being uptime and reliability. How are you ensuring the uptime and availability of these GPU resources on the network, whether through rewards or maybe the lack thereof, and just ensuring that developers and AI researchers or whomever they may be are able to get a kind of a consistent product, if you will, from IONET?
Fair. So I think we built it in a way which is very simple. And when I'll explain you, like it sounds very simple. And to be honest, like the best products which actually last and you can easily extend those business models are the ones which are simple. So what we did was, like, if you take a look at our product, it's basically, you can imagine it as like a straight line where it could be consumed the way you want a Web 2 player want to consume. Like, for example, let's say a Web 2 player used to go to uh, Amazon to hire GPUs. Now they also want a similar kind of model. They want all their GPUs in one data center, right? But at a cheap price. That is possible on the product. If there is a pure Web3, the other extreme end of the spectrum, that they want a real decentralized compute, meaning one from this data center, one from this, another, few from another, like totally decentralized, that is also possible. So we built a product in a way where when a consumer comes in, whether it's Web2 or Web3, for them it's seamless. They don't even know that they're paying with a crypto or a Web3 backed product. That's one. And even when they want to consume it, they can do it in a pure decentralized way, or you can want it in a centralized way. It's your call, right? If you want to basically hire thousands of GPUs in for one data center, we can enable you to do that, right? And if you want every GPU from a different place, we can do that. That's a fundamental thing which we did, right? So that any type of customer, whatever they want, we can enable them technically and business wise for the use case. That was one, right? Plus, we had all kind of inventory which we discussed, like H100, A100, Max, 3090, 4090, so on and so forth, right? Then above that, what we did was, which was the best thing we did, was we basically focused on hiring a great team in the beginning, which has done these things in the past. So I come from the Amazon and AWS background, right? We have people who are coming from VMware, right? We have a PhD again from Amazon. We have a few people from Google. So we had a great team which have done this thing in past. We know exactly what we are building, right? In past. So we were gathering data from all these GPUs, data centers, the community hardware from day one, right? Which helped us enable and create a benchmark that if you want to have a stable inventory, where is the threshold, right? Then the framework which we took as a first phase, the Ray, we basically forked it and made the changes in a way that, let's say if you hire 100 GPUs, and assume two of them go bad, we automatically replace those two seamlessly for you.
Nice.
So we built that framework, forked it, changed it in a way that is seamless for people who are consuming it, right? And that's all happened because we knew people who have done it in past. They saw this problem and they knew that this is where the future is, and they're highly motivated. So we started gathering data right from beginning. We started forking and making these changes in the product. Then we have alerting, dashboards. We have a good relationship in the community, right? So on and so forth, right? So we actually took a stab at it in a product way. We took a stab at it in a business way where we have this all these token, what do you call them, logged or staked from the suppliers, where they basically will make sure that whatever they're giving is actually good, of high quality, real. Then we are gathering data also for this hardware, and whenever it goes bad, we can automatically replace. And we're basically changing and enhancing the products also, these framework which are used to cluster these GPUs. So we actually took a stab at it in every way possible. I think that's what enabled us to have a stable inventory and the framework and the product, which is extendable and stable in
Yeah.
the decentralized space.
Yeah, no, I think anybody listening is definitely going to appreciate the fact that you've leveraged your prior expertise to build a really great usable product and have some foresight or forethought into those different potential problems. You mentioned the token, which is something I was curious about. What is the role of the token play within the network? You mentioned staking. Are there other use cases or sort of applications of the token for IONET?
So the IO token is the heart of the ecosystem, right? So we basically have the incentivization by tokens to get a good supply. We basically gate each and every product access by IO token, right? People can get the compute by IO token, or they can get it by giving USDT also, USD also. But even when that happens, we basically, you will see, we are launching a product known as TNE on chain, which will be launched in next week or so, where you'll see as a part of the pipeline that whenever people pay us in non-USD, then also we buy IO. So everything and every access to our product is gated by IO token, right? The incentive to supply. And now we are creating a new platform where, which we call as IO intelligence, right? For example, for in that we're creating a whole economy of uh, of a model marketplace and AI marketplace where we are motivating the Web2 players to come to Web3 and start building the models here. Because today, for example, when you want to create a model, you go to any Web2 player, you have to pay the money right from time T0, then you build your models, then you train your models, and then you deploy it. While deploy, when you scale your model, you again have to pay, so on and so forth, right? And then once you do all this, when the model is stable, then you find your companies to sell this model and to earn money. Now, what we're doing is we're creating a new economy out in our side, which is when you come, and you want to create a model, we're giving you GPUs for free for a certain time. And
Nice.
when you create a stable model, which will be used by many people, then we give you incentivization also to build this model. So we're creating this whole economy, right? Again, powered by IOCoin overall, right? Supply by IOCoin, right? The product used by IOCoin. So when you're motivating people from Web2 to Web3 to come and create this whole new era of Web3 adoption, that's also powered by IOCoin. So IOCoin itself is the heart of the whole platform. And as and when we are growing in our TNE or consumption of our GPUs, each time somebody wants to consume this, either the hardware or now we're creating a lot of software, which we can go uh, in depth in future. We're creating software layers, which has their own economy, how you want to consume the hardware. That is also gated by IOCoin. Each time somebody wants to consume any of these products, either they're buying IOCoin directly, or even if they pay by any other method, we internally buy IOCoin and gate it. So that's
Yeah.
why it's a very fundamental thing to the platform.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's one of the things that gets me really exciting about this DePIN model is that you can have the token flywheel work the way it does, but you also don't necessarily need to expect all of these big Web2 companies that have a lot of money to spend on these resources. You don't need to expect them to be able to buy the token. You can abstract that away, which is fantastic. I am curious about some of these other services though that your team is working on and building, because I think there's a lot of potential key differentiators that you can bring to the market over and above the benefits that the network can have. You're able to really differentiate yourself. Can you talk about what some of those services are and how that unlocks maybe new channels for user acquisition, where those intersections with maybe AI might be, and just, excuse me, and just unpack
It's
that
okay.
for us?
To be honest, we take things a bit differently internally in the company. So I'll try to answer your question to best of my capability, right? But we have a bit of different nuanced approach of how we do our business. Right? So when we started our company, we want to build a decentralized AI marketplace, right? Period. And that included your DePIN, that included your model marketplace, that included your data marketplace, that included your decentralized storage, so on and so forth. Like a single stop shop for AI, period. Right? But the way we do it internally in the company is that when you're building a skyscraper, every time you add a new brick, it has to add value to the ecosystem. That's the way we do things, right? So we take it quarter by quarter. And then when we see is that each time we deliver in a quarter, we ask our customers what is their main problem. And we ask all of our customers. And if there's a fundamental thing which we see, okay, this is common, then we take that as a main problem to be solved for next quarter. And if we see something in the industry which is very obvious, then that we pick up. These are two things how we take a stab at in the next quarter. We have a long vision, which I said, like the whole decentralized ecosystem which you're building, right? Decentralized cloud. But each quarter, what we do, this is how we plan it out, right? So right now, what we internally in the company feel is that the deepened part of the problem is a solved problem. Right? We basically built a platform which is horizontally scalable. When we did our TGE, at that time we had like more than $3.5 billion worth of inventory with us, right?
Wow.
We know almost all top data centers in the world. If any data center do anything remotely with Web3, there's a high probability they were part of our TGE. So we have good relationship with them. We have a good relationship with our community, right? So we can get as much inventory as we want. Fair? And then what we did was in the second phase in last 4 months was we focused on the utilization and the TNE side of things for the platform. And long and behold, because we are focused on having this good team who know what they're doing, within a span of 4 months, from less than 1 million of TNE, we basically reached a 35 million plus ARR TNE in the company,
Wow.
just exponential growth, right?
That's
And
huge.
so deep in part of things, solve problem. Now the customers are coming just from word of mouth. You name any big AI agent, mostly in the platforms Zedro, Sentinel, like all of these are basically our customers, right? like Sentient, Zebra, all these guys are working with us. And these are big players, right? So now when they see the GPUs are performing and how good a partner we have, then the word of mouth enables us to get more customers. Many times they come by themselves. So this side of things are solved. Now we are seeing Web 2 people also coming in. So now what we are doing is we are talking to them and figuring out what is their next problem. And we saw that many of these customers, they basically are creating their own LLM models. They are creating their own models which they want to compete with these other popular models in the market. Okay. And what they said was that we have a small company of 40, 50 people. And whenever we want to compete with these players, we have to see the performance of our models against them. Correct? That
Right.
means you have to consistently keep an eye, okay, in this particular problem statement, which are the popular models in the world. Then this particular model will be best suited on which particular hardware because you have so many GPU models also. Now, on each model, when you deploy on GPU, you can actually deploy a what we call in engineering like a parameterized version, meaning how much context it can learn. There's so many variation and nuances which you can tweak it to when you work with these models. Now, as a company of 40 people, if you want to have this thing done, you're basically keeping 5 to 10 people in your company just on this problem statement. And this is not even your core problem which you're solving. You're just creating a new model of your own, which is your main problem statement. And you're trying to see how good a model is yours compared to them. And for that part, you're spending so much money and resources. So then you okay, it's a good problem to have. And then everyone was saying the same thing. So we created this IO intelligence where we took a part of our inventory and for the help of the community and these companies we were working with, we basically deployed all these popular models for free on the platform till a certain usage. All right. And we said, okay, and we powered it through an API that you can start consuming it. We have a chat version also for normal people to use it. And like a lot of customers were happy. And it went to a level where now Rep2 companies came from the Asian Middle East side where they said, we love your product, but we want a separate instance of it. We do not want to give our data to these models where other people can also consume the same model because it's getting trained and learning on this and this data in context. We want a separate instance of it and they're okay to pay for it. So this became a business. And now on the same side of things, they're asking us to create more products to deploy a model, give it data, decentralized data. Like they're asking for these things. That is the next tab as a product which we're doing.
Interesting.
So we take it quarter by quarter. So this is the plan for next like 1.5 months. 2 months we have done this. We have another 1.5 month left, right? And we're doing TNE on chain, right? Like touchwood, like God has been so great. The growth was exponential. When some of the people were like, literally, it's too good to be true that you're growing at such a high pace. And rather than fighting a battle, we said, okay, like our revenue is real. What we'll do is we'll put everything on chain. So within next week, we'll deploy TNE on chain that whatever we get as revenue, it's there on your Solana blockchain. You can see what's happening. So you can check it by yourself. So we're launching this product. So this is this quarter's goals. I think in a couple of weeks, our whole strategic team is again meeting. And then we will finalize what the plan would be for next 3 months. Long-winded answer, but long vision, I told you what we're doing, right? What the next quarter would look like, that we decide every quarter depending on the feedback of our customers and what we see in the market.
No, that's huge. There, I had two thoughts as you were sharing that. The first is not financial advice, but instead of going to buy the gold or go find the gold, you're buying IONET is basically buying the gold finding materials. And so you talked about all these LLMs that are building on your network. So again, not financial advice, but that was the first thing that I thought of. The other was that this approach that you're taking sounds like it's going to be a major catalyst for kind of spurring adoption because you really create like a very strong incentive mechanism for these companies to want to build on IONET given some of those toolings that you're able to provide for them. And so I'm sure after they get to run through that process, then they turn around and start consuming the GPUs on the other side of the network, probably at larger scales. Is that safe to assume?
That's correct, right? That's what I was saying. The flywheel of DePIN has already started because what we have seen in Web3 and Web2 till now for us, the customers from Web2 and Web3 is that they initially come with small orders and then they see how you perform for a week or a month. And once they're confident, then they come with big orders. And the word of mouth is so good that imagine if you're a builder and you basically were spending $20 million in an inventory and now suddenly you're paying $5 million. Anytime you go on a dinner with your friends, you'll say, like, I paid $15 million. I hired 10 more data scientists in my team, and I'm doing all this good and cool stuff. Like you can actually do. And that's exactly what's happening in our side. Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely correct.
That's huge. No, that's very exciting. Is there anything else with respect to IONET that's going on that we didn't get a chance to maybe unpack or cover for folks that you think's relevant to catch up on or understand?
So one more thing which we're actually working on internally slowly is the data marketplace also.
Hmm.
We basically realized that the future is data for sure. Like just in terms of some numbers, if I give you a little bit of clarity, right? Till 2020, the world produced 64 zettabytes of data. That's like a trillion gigabytes, right? And by 2025, this became like 183 or 184 zettabytes, like
Wow.
3x in the span of 5 years. And now in future, when we're talking about the adoption of AI agents coming in, this growth of data will become more exponential, like period, right? And the performance or the model is directly proportional to how good data you have and where you're sourcing from, how confident you are, how structured it is, like how much biasness it has, and so on and so forth, right? So creating a data marketplace where the access of data is with all the builders, is not with some centralized player. That means people have incentive to share this data to the other people, creating that economy and creating the product where this data gets structured in a way which is easily consumable by people. And then they have a transparency also where it originated from, how it got processed, how did you remove biases if anything was there. Like creating a product around this so that people can train their models on a data which is they are very confident of. Plus, they have the data in the first place. We're creating this data marketplace also. The model marketplace for us is a great win. We are doubling down on that for multiple other products on top of it. But this data side of things also working, right? And in parallel, we are, I think my marketing team will kill me if I'll tell you, but I think very soon we will do some other partnerships also in decentralized storage side also going forward. So any AI company, when they think of creating a decentralized app, we'll be a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Decentralized storage, IO. Compute, IO. Any other product to train, deploy inference, IO. Right? If I want to gather some data from some particular business domain, IO. Right? So that's the
That's
place
huge.
we'll be at very soon.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I'm curious on the data marketplace side. Are you targeting companies that have large data sets that they've been using to train their LLMs, or are you targeting, call it, DePIN projects who are generating lots of data? What is your customer
It's
archetype for the data marketplace
it,
on the?
it's a combination of both, right? The in any business, what you do is you basically get the low hanging fruits first, and that obviously would be like creating synergies, right? So we have a decent name in Web3 side, right? The other Web3 companies know us. Now approaching them and partnering with them, we're first like stab at it, right? And plus, these companies would have already worked with some other partners. So you have that exponential growth in the very beginning in a very easy way. That you're a partner with multiple Web3 companies which are easy to work with because we work in same domain, we have same ethos of Web3, we know why we are here to basically enabling the community and the builders, right? So that synergies and normally decision making in Web3 side is extremely fast compared to these Web2 companies. So these deals can also move very fast. That'll be the first thing, right? And they have also done some work, so we'll get a good growth. Once that is done, then we're already talking with some big Web2 companies. But even if we're talking with Web2 companies now, it takes a bit of time for them do the paperwork,
The
move
sales cycles
everything,
can be
get to an
long.
agreement, and yes. Yes. So I think we're
Yeah.
doing both, but practically you will see Web3 moving first and then Web2 coming in.
Very interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see a large value add, especially for as you're training models. A lot of times you're dealing with older data sets and being able to, at least on the deep inside, take what is current real time data and being able to feed that into models, I think is huge. There's a lot of companies that are specifically going after the data capture and aggregation side, given the potential viability. So I could see that being super synergistic. And I know your marketing people are going to kill you, but do you have general rough timelines on kind of the data marketplace side within there? Are we talking Q2, Q3?
So don't get me killed. Like patience. Like I'm sure we'll meet somewhere in the future, and that time I'll share more details with you. And again, as I said, like the strategic team is supposed to meet in a couple of weeks, so that decision will be taken in that time.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We won't want to hold anyone's feet to the fire. Gosh, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Obviously, you've really demonstrated clear product market fit around leveraging the DePIN model in terms of compute, but it's very clear that's the launch pad for all of these other tools and services. And so I'm super excited to see that traction and growth. Where is the best place for people to go, either learn more information, if they are a developer, become a customer, like where should people go to stay updated with all things IONET?
So we have a very good community on X. We have a Discord group, and like, people can reach out to me directly on X. And we have a support group also, which they can actually reach out to from the Ionic website also. So these are I'll say, the best three channels to reach out to us. Feel free to ping me on X, to be honest. Like, I'm very active there recently.
Okay. Sounds good. And we will have all of that linked below. I think we're going to wrap it up here, folks. This has been a very fun conversation. Definitely go check out all of the IONET information, website, Discord, Twitter, X, you name it. This is definitely a project worth following and staying up to date with. But we want to thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure meeting you and talking with you.
Likewise. Bye-bye.